Hello guys, today we're going to be doing a video on GHOSTWIRE Tokyo using the RTX 3060 Ti. We're running a Ryzen 3700X with 32GB of RAM running at 3200 MHz. Alright, let's jump into the settings. Alright, we're going to be using the high presets for this test. I've already tested the ultra presets and the differences between high and ultra is very minor. You only lose about 5 to 10 FPS at most from going to high to ultra. So it's not too much of a difference, you don't have to be worried about that. But what I've realized is the most demanding setting out of any of these is global illumination. Using SSGI will tank your frame rate by about 10 to 20 FPS. It's very demanding. And you can always either use SSAO, which is less taxing it seems like. You know, you still lose a couple of frames, but it's not as bad. Or you can just turn it off. It's up to you. But for this test, I'm going to keep it on SSGI since that's what I did for the 3080 video. Let's jump to the benchmark. And I gotta say, from the 3080 video, this game looks really good at 1440p and above. 1080p it still looks good, but I don't think it does it justice. 1440p and above, the game really does look good, especially all the reflections on the floor. Looking at a frame rate, we're getting 100 to 130 FPS, average frame rate of 123. Obviously, for this type of game, it's more than enough. You shouldn't have any issues playing like this. Alright, here we go, 1440p at high settings, and the game is looking really nice right now. Like I was saying before, 1440p and above, it looks insanely nice. So 3060 Ti has 20% less power, I believe, than a 3080, but we're getting quite a big FPS difference between the two. I think we're getting 120 FPS here for the 3080, and now we're sitting at 70 to 75 FPS here. The game feels fine, it's an FPS, so you want to ideally have more frames, but even at 80 FPS, the mass movement feels fine, feels very smooth, and no stuttering at all. But I was expecting a little bit more, maybe 100 frames, maybe, you know, in the 90s at least, but we are getting 75 FPS, so. And like I said in the 3080 video, you want to at least give yourself some headroom in case you do have those more intensive scenes and those more intensive fights, because this is the starting area, I guess. So we're not really seeing too much. It is raining and there's a lot of reflections going on, but we don't know how the game's gonna work when you're in an intensive fight or in a big crowded open area. So just give yourself some headroom in case you do get into those areas and you do lose more frames. So you still stay above 60. Yeah. Let's over this part of the video. The 4K and the 1440p high tests that are going on right now, they had a bit of a recording issue and the quality got messed up. This is fixed later in the video where I'm doing the ray tracing tests, but this portion, the quality looks really bad. Obviously in the game doesn't look as bad as this, but in saying that, all the FPS and all the numbers are still accurate. Alright, so we're getting around 30-ish FPS at 4K high. This feels really bad to play. The mouse movement feels awful. I think this is enhanced because of the mouse. If you were using a controller, this wouldn't be as bad, but 30 FPS in this game especially looks really bad. I mean, it feels really bad. It feels very stuttery, even though the animations are playing very smoothly. 4K high with DLSS quality. This is more acceptable. We're running pretty close to 60 FPS. We do get some dips into the mid-50s, but for the most part, we are sitting at 60. But keeping in mind that we might run into a more heavier scene, we'll give ourselves a 10 FPS buffer, which will leave us with around 50 FPS in a worst case scenario. That's just an estimation, it doesn't mean it will be accurate. 3080 video, when you're playing at 4K, DLSS setting, you can push it up to balanced or performance. You do lose a bit of quality of performance, but quality and balanced, you frame rate wise, we gain a good 5 to 10 FPS from going to quality to balanced. Now, the quality wise though, I don't see a difference between the two. I think they're both really good at 4K. I don't think it matters. If you're running at 1080p and you, for whatever reason, you want to have DLSS on, then I would stick to quality then, and wouldn't risk going to balance the performance. But at high resolutions, you can play around with it, go down to performance if you want, and it will still have a good time. We can do medium settings as well and then move it up to high. It's fine. Okay, let's do medium ray tracing first, and I'll move it up to high, and then see how I'm running the game at 1080p high with ray tracing set to medium.
Everything's set to medium. There's reflection, there's calling, and then there's shadows, all set to medium. And honestly, still playable. The reflections, to me, to my eyes, I can't really complain about screen space reflections versus ray tracing, because I think they both look really good. And I would rather have screen space because you get more frames. Let's go ahead and bring it up to high. Okay, now everything's maxed out. Every setting is maxed out, and we lost, wow. We lost 11 frames on average, 11 FPS. Probably more than this, to be honest. This is just like the best case scenario, I guess. Frame rate is too jumpy. The movement feels, the turning of the camera just feels kind of off a little bit. Not too bad, not as bad as 30 like we did at 4K native, but yeah, 50 FPS. I will enable ray tracing for this. I will set it to balanced since that seems to be a good balance of quality and actually at 1080p I feel like we can't do balanced. I'll try it out. Still looks good. What looks bad is the rain. The rain splashes look very blurry, but the textures itself look pretty nice. But yeah, we gained 40 FPS. We doubled our frames from going from no DLSS to DLSS set to balance. We're getting 40 FPS right now. I mean, I wouldn't recommend playing like this when you could be getting far better frames. I think we were in the 70s at native 1440p, so we lost 30 FPS around there, 30 to 40 FPS. So yeah, I would. It looks. I mean, the shadows look amazing. The reflections look great, but yeah, not recommended. So let's go ahead and bring it up to balanced DLSS. Alright, balanced DLSS. We're getting 85 FPS, so we pretty much gained all that frames back, even better than native, I guess. The quality looks flawless. I think this is obviously due to the increase of resolution from 1080p to 1440p. Not losing any quality at all. I wish it was raining a little bit, but we can't. I don't really have control over that. So you range from 70 to 90 FPS, so this gives you plenty of headroom in case something goes wrong. You fall to the 60s and all that. Okay, ray traced, 1440p, everything maxed out, 30 FPS, 35 FPS. It's honestly not the best. We're getting 47 FPS, 49 FPS, 50 FPS, and then 66 FPS all of a sudden. Okay, so I guess it took time to catch up, and this looks so good. High ray tracing looks much better than medium ray tracing. Just looking at this area here, look how good the reflections look. Wow, that looks crazy clean. Frame rate is above 60 still. So we ran into an issue where the game was freezing up. We were running at 4 FPS when I turned the shadows off. That was a glitch. Looks like we gained about 4 to 5 FPS from having shadows off. Ray trace shadows off. Now personally for me, I wouldn't recommend doing this because you can just use DLSS to get the FPS back that you lost from ray tracing. DLSS set to balance. Now VRAM is getting close to our limit. We got an 8GB limit on our GPU, and we already had 6 gigs, so it's kind of worrying. 4K, we might run into a VRAM issue and the game will just freeze up, but we'll see. Okay, even with DLSS set to balance, we're getting 7 FPS, and VRAM isn't an issue here because oh, there we go, it woke up. Never mind, we're not getting 7 FPS, we're getting 45 FPS with DLSS set to balance. Obviously this is playable if you want. The mouse movement feels fine. I don't know how it would feel during a fight, but if you want to play at 4K, I would probably want to have ray tracing disabled. Alright, that's it for the video guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a like and a subscription, we highly appreciate it. See you next time.